And we have Mr. Matthew Murr with a question here saying, do you think Disney should really own Marvel? And do you think it would be in a better position today if they had never bought out Marvel or Lucasfilm? Because a lot of people now he says, because a lot of people are now blaming Iger for the state of Disney instead of Chapek. In short, Matthew, no, I think buying Marvel and Lucasfilm were actually brilliant decisions. Those two decisions right there, I think, were some of the smarter things that Bob Iger did.
Yes.
I think Marvel is like, I mean, has been a total cash cow for the Walt Disney Company. And contrary to like what a lot of fans believe, I actually think the superhero thing does fit within Disney's sort of image. You have a lot of stuff for like the princesses and things like that. And then you have the heroes, right? And they feel like they're kind of like the yin and yang kind of thing. I don't know. It's like princesses and superheroes and pirates. It all kind of feels like it's in that Disney kind of realm, in my opinion.
And that was a huge problem that Disney had to face, because they had a lot geared towards young girls, right, and they really didn't have too much for boys. And then Cars came out, and then with the pirates, and then even more, with superheroes, that goes further beyond the way that Marvel, the way Disney, envisioned for Marvel, is that, you could be 7 or 17 and you would still be into Marvel.
Right. And then with Star Wars, it's like Disney already had like a theme park presence for the Star Wars stuff with Star Tours. So it was kind of already like Star Wars already had like its foot in the door with that. And so it made sense for them to buy Lucasfilm. And honestly, I've said this a lot. I think that Star Wars has always felt like a very Disney kind of property. It's very much a galactic fairy tale. I mean, it's very, very Disney. It's always been Disney, in my opinion. So I think that buying those two studios was definitely the right call. I don't know. I think that the only acquisition that Iger made that was kind of really much in question was the Fox deal for $70 billion. That one, I don't know.
Yeah, and just to put a pin in the Lucasfilm and Marvel debate here. I mean, the thing about Marvel and Star Wars, or I'm sorry, Lucasfilm, probably would have been acquired by somebody else if Disney hadn't purchased it. I mean, look at how much look at we have whole studios buying other studios at this point. They probably would have been acquired by I don't know, Comcast or somebody else, right? And then the question is like what happens to not just Star Tours but Indiana Jones Adventure, for example. What happens with the MCU as a whole? If Comcast gets its hands on Marvel, what happens to Superhero Island and all that kind of stuff, right? The brain just goes nuts thinking about this kind of stuff, and Iger was very shrewd in buying Marvel, especially at that time. I believe the first Avengers film hadn't even come out.
No,
so it's kind of like a little bit of a risk in that aspect, right? Because we didn't really quite know how that was all going to go. But that was a phenomenal move by Iger. You got to give him credit for that. And even Michael Eisner himself, he just could never really see Marvel as being part of the Disney brand. He had multiple chances to buy Marvel and just didn't. Iger, the shrewd businessman that he is, that was a good move to buy Marvel, but also to buy Lucasfilm and finally incorporate that permanently into the kind of the Disney lexicon, so to speak, and work out that deal with George Lucas. I mean, that was pretty well done. As far as the execution goes, a little bit later down the line with Lucasfilm, you could definitely argue, but I do agree. Fox was definitely the one that was the head scratcher, especially with the raw amount of dollars that went into that deal. Disney got a little bit hosed on that one, I think.
And not even really too much that you could really capitalize on it. I mean, all the Fox material is basically just for the streaming platform. You can't really, as I said this many times before, you're not really going to spend $71 billion, whether, partial of it was, cash and then the rest in stocks. And you're going to see Kevin McAllister walking around one of the Disney parks. It's like, it's
right. No, 100%. Like most of the like when they bought Fox, like most of the properties that they got from that deal already had a presence in the theme parks. So they got, like, I believe, A New Hope in that deal. Star Wars New Hope. They got the X-Men, and they got, so yeah, they got some Star Wars, they got some Marvel, but these things were already like in the parks. So what did you really gain? Really not too much in terms of the park. Now they did also acquire Avatar, which was good because they already had an Avatar land. But it's like I said, even Avatar, it was already in the parks though. So now you have this $70 billion purchase of Fox, and really, what is in the Fox library you can really put in the parks? What are you going to have a Die Hard ride or something? Like, there's nothing you can capitalize on, at least in the park. From a park perspective, there's really nothing, and everything that you could capitalize on is already in there. So it was like,
that last acquisition, it makes me think of an F word, but it's sure not Fox.
That's it exactly. I mean, from the park standpoint, I don't really know how you could really capitalize on it. Oh, maybe you could do Simpsons. Oh wait, can't do that. So it's like it just beyond me. Now, in terms of streaming, yeah, maybe you can capitalize on some things, but didn't they get rid of the 20th Century Fox branding? So you can't even really have like an outlet for that in terms of kind of the more edgy or maybe like non-Disney family friendly content. They really don't have a branding methodology in order to put that stuff out in a way that would more take advantage of that huge content library that 20th Century Fox had. It is the most bizarre decision in how they've gone along with capitalizing on that content library and really flexing those IPs out has just been even more bizarre when you really take a look at it, considering how much they spent.
And if they wanted to make that purchase, for the streaming, down the road for, certain things, but I mean, not for that price. I think that price tag on that particular acquirement for that studio, that is what's baffling to me. It's like
with how much they've been able to
with Lucasfilm, because they spent how much for Lucasfilm?
$4 billion roughly.
Yeah. Okay, so it's like, compare that to what they purchased for Fox. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
With how much they've been able to leverage, with how much they've been able to do in terms of the Fox properties and content library, and when it comes to the parks and so forth, honestly, we should be looking at like a $3 billion valuation, maybe even less than that. I mean, that's the delta we're talking about here. 70 billion, 3 billion. That's really where we're at right now.
And if
remarkable.
And if the world did have to go, into what we're in today, nothing against Disney, but I kind of wish that it would have happened before the dotted line was signed for that acquisition, in a sense, because that would have saved Disney a whole lot of mess of what they're dealing with right now.
Well, to give
interest
you guys
alone.
Oh yeah, no, it's crazy. To give you guys at home a little perspective on how much they overpaid for Fox, if you took the Lucasfilm, Pixar, and Marvel acquisitions, it only amounts to $15 billion. $15 billion. Those three studios are only $15 billion. They spent $70 billion on Fox. How ridiculous is that?
It's madness. It's so crazy. I was uncomfortable with the deal when it was originally at like 30 or 40 billion. I was like, oh, this is way too much. This is there's no way. And they couldn't even get the sports rights. They had to, slice that off because of the verticals. The US government would have never allowed that, that kind of compartmentalization or acquisition to take place. So it's like you didn't even get the full shebang package, so to speak. It's totally bizarre.
And you know what, Dre? What they should have done, actually, because I know Murdoch probably wanted to sell the whole thing.
Yeah.
But what they should have done probably would have been buy the whole studio and then sell off majority of what you don't need. So you keep your
100%.
You keep your X-Men, you keep maybe your Simpsons for the streamer, and you keep your Avatar.
Yeah,
right.
and then you sell a majority of it to other studios and get some of that money back. Majority of the stuff you can't really capitalize on any of it within Disney. There's not much you can really do with it. It's pointless. They completely overspent on that studio.
They got rid of the 20th Century Fox branding. Couldn't you have imagined like a different what do they call that? Like a different button within Disney Plus that gave you 20th Century Fox content, like under its own kind of branding. That way it's like, okay, for more edgier content, stuff that doesn't maybe necessarily fit into the nice family-friendly Disney lexicon, you have this kind of outlet, right? You have this kind of panel that allows you to get into that kind of realm of content. They didn't even do that, though. That was the most bizarre thing to me. It's like, why are you getting rid of this branding? I understand there were problems when it came to like Fox News and Fox Sports and all that kind of stuff. I get it. But you could have done something, maybe a 20th century branding, for example, right? Something that maybe didn't include Fox, but had its library, so that you could, put that on Disney Plus and people could get a lot of value out of that. They didn't even do that, though. It's just the most asinine, brain dead decision that I've ever seen Disney make, and at a considerable expense. The whole company was only worth like $150 billion in terms of assets, appreciable assets. you just took on $70 billion worth, and what'd you get for it? I don't see it. It's crazy.
No, they didn't really get much for it. I mean, they got a few things. They kind of completed their Star Wars acquisition with that, and they gained some more Marvel, which is great. But
not enough.
No, it's not. It's none of that's worth $70 billion. I mean, they completely shit the bed with that. And again, we've talked about it before. And hey, our buddy Sean Rankin the Mouse is going to give us a lot of shit for saying this, but look, I mean, I do believe, and I could be wrong, but I do believe that Bob Iger pushed for that acquisition. He was going to overpay for it, come hell or high water, because he knew he was going to retire, and he didn't want to look like he was going out on a loss.
Yep, that's
and
exactly
that's really, really not cool, because you're putting the company at major financial risk, and we're really lucky, to be honest with you, because that landed right before the pandemic, right before.
Yeah. I mean,
we almost had a saving grace from that deal. I mean, even though they would have lost money due to the shutdown and the pandy and what have you, but I mean, I think they would have recovered much faster than just coming off an acquisition that big, that ridiculous, compared to then having to deal with a worldwide shutdown.
Well, I think George Nogi, I think you're it's kind of interesting, because OG I believe is saying that they were able to capitalize a little bit on the streaming aspect and what Fox brought with it, with the pandemic. But George, you're actually saying the opposite, that they would have, if it had the pandemic would have happened right before the deal, maybe they could have not taken on this much debt and interest payment and all that kind of stuff. Maybe they would have been swayed not to go forward with the deal. It's a very kind of interesting argument from both sides.
Yeah, no, 100%. It was a bad call. And look, if you had to buy the whole thing, then fine, buy the whole thing, but then sell off what you don't need and make some of that, recoup some of that money. I'm a streamer guy. I love streaming, and I don't really see much of the Fox stuff, even on Hulu. Like there was look, I mean, there's some of those Fox movies and Searchlight and stuff, but I mean, it's not like overwhelming. There's just not a whole lot there.
Do you think in time that they will consider selling off piece by piece eventually, if they really truly see that down the road they're not capitalizing on anything, and it's like it's just sitting there collecting dust and cobwebs, and it's like, and they need to pay off this debt plus the interest?
They should, and they should look at it's what, Dre? I'm sorry.
Oh, you would have thought they would have done it already, but go ahead, OG. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, you have a company like Netflix, who's like thirsty for their own franchises and what have you. You could sell probably most of that Fox library to Netflix. They would gladly take it. They need that right now. And I mean, some of their original stuff is great, but they need like way more of their own stuff.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And to your statement, Dre, it makes me wonder if they'll consider it now that Chapek is now just helming the ship, so to speak, by himself.
Right. Maybe.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of the. I think that's kind of the idea, right? I think you brought up something very interesting, George. Peter Rice gone, that might have, I don't know, may have prevented Chapek from selling off some of these properties and some of this content library before. Well, that's out now, all gone out the window a little bit, and Chapek is definitely, tightening the reins, so to speak, and getting everybody on his side and within his vision. So maybe he has an idea of like, hey, listen, maybe we, to your point, George, maybe we spin off some of this stuff and sell the rights and everything to other studios. That way, we can kind of make some of our money back on this and kind of get into a normalized cash flow situation. It's a very interesting idea. I would have thought that they would have done it already, but hey, maybe there were some certain impediments that prevented it, those deals actually from taking place.
Yeah, it's very possible. And I know we talked about this before, with the firing unexpectedly of Peter Rice, but I do really feel like that was part of Chapek's plan, possibly for the good in a sense, and I may be in the minority of that, but so that way he can kind of not have any more obstacles in his way going forth now that he is basically the head of the company now without anybody looking over his shoulder.
Yeah.
Right. No, 100%. 100%. So I don't know. I mean, in short, Matthew, I mean, to kind of like, kind of tie this up in a nice little bow, the Marvel and Lucasfilm acquisitions were 100% the right thing to do. Bob Iger was brilliant in buying both of those properties. I would also include Pixar, maybe even Pixar, even more so, probably.
Probably more so, just because they were able to infuse all that talent and everything to the entire branches of the company. Pixar was also instrumental in convincing Marvel to actually sell to Disney and stuff like that too. So that kind of paved the way for some of those other additions and so forth. I think I will agree with you, OJ. I think Pixar was, the best out of all of them, and everything kind of came after it.
Right. No, 100%. So we'll see how it all pans out. But I think they should do a big garage sale and sell a lot of this Fox stuff that they don't need and make that money back, recoup it. Right now, you need it. Right now, we just got out of the pandemic, or we're still in it, but the financial effects are waning. But you got to stop the bleeding there. We have a lot of issues with the economy and all kinds of stuff. Right now would be a great time to sell off some of that Fox stuff that you don't need and recoup some of that money and kind of lower that debt. I think that would be a smart move on Chapek's part, but we'll see what he does. We'll see. Hey, look, for all his flaws, Chapek's actually a really smart businessman, and that might be on the table for him.
Yeah. And I agree with you on that one. Like, just have one big sale of all the useless stuff that's like just not making money, that's not benefiting Disney. Get rid of all the useless Fox content that is not useless to other companies, but it would be useless to Disney. Other useless stuff that's just sitting around, like Lightyear, what have you. Do something with it. I don't care.
If you cannot properly leverage these IP, these franchises, and all of these assets properly, absolutely sell them off, no question.